Are you looking for a new math curriculum? Well, CTC Math specializes in providing online video tutorials that take a multi-sensory approach to learning. Favorably reviewed in Kathy Duffy's 102 Top Picks and the Old Schoolhouse Crew Review. The lessons are short and concise to help your children break down concepts and appreciate math in a whole new way. The lessons are taught the traditional way, not to the test. Each one of the video tutorials is taught by an internationally acclaimed teacher, Pat Murray, who is renowned for teaching math concepts in a simple, easy-to-understand way and in only a few minutes at a time. Using a multi-sensory approach, having the combination of effective graphics and animation synchronized with the voice of a friendly teacher together with practical assessment, even students who struggled with math are getting fantastic results. And the ones that were doing okay before now are doing brilliantly. Visit CTC Math today and start your free trial. That's ctcmath.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice Gerwitz, is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey friends, and welcome. Today I am excited to bring you the first in the Inspire series. We are going to start with the topic of teaching kids to listen. It's a challenge, but it's not impossible. And in this episode, you will discover practical and effective ways to inspire kids to listen each and every time, empowering you to make a difference in their learning journey. And if you think it's too grandiose of a promise, please stay tuned and see if I deliver on that. So today our episode is Inspire Kids to Listen. This is episode 533, and you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. You can also find us on the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. Well, I've been inspired, pun intended, to do a series on inspiring your children. And this series is going to include inspiring kids to listen, learn, succeed, and encourage self-esteem. One other thing I thought about was I'm going to share an episode on teaching kids to empathize. And I know that seems counterproductive when you're thinking about education, but empathy is really important. Some kids naturally do it and others don't. As I'm working on this series, especially with the first one going out, each series will be following weekly. And if you think of another topic other than those 5, shoot me an email at felice@mediaangels.com and give me an idea, and I'll see if I can create another topic that goes along with the Inspire series. I want to thank our sponsor, and that's CTC Math. You can find more information at ctcmath.com. As homeschool moms, we want to encourage learning, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose of homeschooling, is to teach your children. But they can't learn if they are a problem, have a problem listening. So listening can be anything from following instructions to just being obedient children, right? And we want to give our children the ability to think. We don't want, little rote puppets walking around. We want them to have that ability to think for themselves. I do anyway. And I've done podcasts, and I'll have to find the link, on giving your kids time to think. Because I believe that we also have a society where people just want to be told a truth rather than seek the truth. Okay, I'll get off my little podium here, but I want to share that good listening skills are the basis for order, disciplined children, eager learners, and all around peace within your home. If your child knows what to expect and has a routine for accomplishing the goals each day, the work gets easier for you and for them. And one effective tool is to be sure your child understands expectations. And the easiest way is ask them, do you know what's expected today? If they say no, ask another sibling to respond, or you fill in the blank. And now ask the child to repeat in his own words what is expected. I want to give you an example of what I mean. And this is actually outside of the home. So how many times have you had to take your children shopping with you, whether it's the grocery store or the big box store or even just a little mini mart store? And they touch everything and they ask for everything. And so I was aware of that. And so before we'd go into the store, I would just say, okay, we're going to the grocery store today. I'm going to ask you not to touch anything or take anything off the shelf unless I ask you. The second thing is I don't want you to ask for me to buy anything. I have a list of groceries we need, and this is our budget, and this is all we're going to buy. So the kids knew ahead of time that, number one, they weren't supposed to touch anything, and number two, they weren't supposed to ask me to buy anything or have a meltdown when I said no. And I asked them to tell me what I was asking, what the rules were. And they would. And so were they always perfect? Of course not. I had those that pushed the envelope and, really tried my patience. But for the most part, they knew what was expected, because I would also say, and if you can't listen, when we get home, instead of doing XYZ, whatever that was, you're not going to be able to do that. And so it took discipline on my part to stick to what I said, and also on theirs not to ask for anything. There's a lot of other things you can do. They can bring, their own money and budget for whatever that is, whether it's, a pack of gum or candy or whatever. You can work things out with your kids, but if they know the expectation, they will be able to effectively navigate that. Effective listening is a tool that ensures that your child understands and has the information you need. And it's effective because when the children express their thoughts in their own words, they've processed the information enough to tell you back. So as educators, we were taught this procedure in class management, and we also used it in class discipline. I had a really hard time with it because I felt like, oh my gosh, it works so well that you are kind of conniving your students to listen. But really what it does is it feeds back to the child what they're saying to you, so you can both understand what is being said and correct it if it's misconstrued. I had one child that I would tell to do something, and he always reacted negatively. And I said, what do you think I'm asking you? And when he told me, that was not at all what I meant. So once we get rid of some of these things, especially when it comes to listening and how that ties into behavior and how it ties into education, it really helps to improve our homeschool. When I was in middle school, the teacher did a simple exercise, and I want to encourage you to do this with your kids. If your kids are listening in right now, maybe you want to stop this and then listen in at a later time, because I know some of you will email me and tell me that you listen with your kids. But this middle school teacher encouraged us to listen and told us how important listening was. And I remember she used to go on and on about listening until you were like, oh my gosh, here she goes again. But she gave us a quiz, and she said, today I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Of course, we all groaned, and it's going to represent 70% of your grade. And we're like, what the heck is this? She goes, I know you didn't prepare, and I know you may not know the information on this quiz, but I just kind of want to see how you're going to do. And, we're all thinking, gosh, this is really not fair. And I'm going to tell my mom when I get home. All these thoughts are going through your head. And she goes, I want you to listen to what I'm saying. And we're going, here you go again, because we've already heard this lots of times. She said, this is a multiple choice test, and you can mark the answers A, B, C, or D. But before you begin, put your name on the paper and read the instructions carefully. And we're thinking, you already told us the instructions, right? She goes, there's no talking. And after you complete your test, turn your paper over and wait quietly for further instructions. So she passed out the papers and we began taking the tests. And I wish I could say I was one of the kids that followed her instructions. But it took me 2 or 3 questions, and I didn't know the answers to these questions. She purposely made them super hard. And I was thinking, gosh, you didn't even go over this stuff. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to look at the instructions. And the instructions said, write your name at the top of the page. Do not answer any of the questions. Turn your paper over and put your head on your desk and wait for further instructions. So I erased the 3 guesses that I had on my questions and turned the paper over and put my head down. Slowly, the rest of the class caught wind that half of us had our heads down and we could not possibly have finished that test. They did what the rest of us did. They went back and read the instructions and groaned as they erased their answers, wrote their names at the top, and turned their pages over. The teacher called times up, and some of the kids that didn't catch wind of this were really groaning and upset. And she said, this was just a test to see if you've been listening to me. I asked you to follow the instructions, and it is very important that you know what the instructions are so that you can follow them correctly, because you can't learn unless you have the ability to follow instructions. So, what does failure to listen bring us? Basically heartache, right? Unruly kids, unfinished schoolwork, chores left undone, or haphazardly finished assignments. And really general lack of control within our homes. If your kids are looking for a textbook or workbook that they didn't put away after class the previous day, or they can't find a pencil, or they can't find one of the hundreds of things that they've lost, it goes to reason that they didn't listen and follow through when it came to putting away their previous day's classwork, right? I mean, we had a designated area for homeschooling. My kids had desks, and they still lost books because they invariably would take their math book, bring it into their room, do an assignment, and then lose it under a pile of clothes that they didn't pick up that I asked them to. And I realized as I had more and more children that the first 2 were manageable, but then when it came to number 3 and number 4 and number 5, I really needed to go back and make some corrections in my parenting. And even with my teens, it really worked because I stuck to it. So how much time is wasted looking for something that's lost? What about the time it takes you to explain a lesson that you already explained earlier? Learning challenges aside, many kids just do not listen when we talk. And you're going to say, but Felice, it takes too long. I have too many kids. I can't make sure that they all understand what the instructions are. Believe me, the kid you're talking to may not hear the instructions, but brother number 2 or sister number 3 heard them and could tell that child what they need to do. We have to spend the time, and it doesn't take that long to spend the time to just make sure they understand what is expected of them. Failure to listen causes us frustration. We have to explain things again or remind the kids to do their chores or schoolwork again and again. And when I talk about listening, I don't mean that your children are parking their brains at the door. We have to encourage our kids to think for themselves when it comes to faith, morals, or behavior. We don't want zombies, but we do want kids that are socially responsible, that if you're a Christian, that love the Lord, and that are moral individuals. I have a really hard time with, kids who say, well, I didn't mean to. Because there's a difference between not meaning to do something and actually doing it and just saying you didn't mean to, or saying you're sorry when you're not sorry. So that's a pet peeve of mine, and I was really strict on that point. Are there accidents? Of course there are. But when your children are just saying they're sorry, or, it was an accident when they purposely did something. I'm talking about making sure that children understand the importance of following instructions, and part of that is being a responsible person, a responsible member of the family, and eventually a responsible adult. Someone who can deal with hardships and yet overcome. A lot of times there are hard things in our lives and we can't deal with them. My son's in the military and he has a leadership position. And he's talked about the guys who have just left. And that means you get put in jail. And I said, do they know that? And he said, oh yeah. He said they just say it's too hard and they can't handle it. And he has to convince them to come back and to go through the right channels so they're not thrown in jail. And it's just, we discussed it and he said, these are kids who have never really had to do anything hard. And he goes, what we're doing is really not that hard. But he's also the youngest of 5. And I made my kids do what they needed to do. And that took a lot of time on my part. Did I always follow through? Of course not. But as much as I possibly could. When you ask something as a mom, as a dad, as a homeschool parent, you need to expect that it is done. But you need to also do it in love. Your kids need to know that you love them. What do you expect out of your children? Do they know? Do you know? If you're unsure, take a few minutes or more and think about it. Don't become overwhelmed by just one day or even one subject. Sometimes kids don't know what to do because they're not sure of the instructions. Other times, kids know what's expected but choose not to do the work or the chores that are expected for the day. I remember a mom telling me that it took her child all day to do her math. And I said, why? And she said, well, because she just didn't get it done. And I said, so what did you do about it? And she goes, well, I just let her do it the next day. Hey, if I knew I could get away with not doing my math and I could do it all day long and just have to do it tomorrow and not do any other subject, I might push the envelope. I mean, we're human. We're not perfect, right? So how do you encourage a child, let's say, who's going to take all day to do math? That child may need you sitting right there with them. Yeah, I know it's hard. I know you have other kids. I know you have other obligations. But it may take a period of time where that child has you right there, where you can make sure that they're focusing on their work or helping them in some way to accomplish what they need to accomplish. Another friend of more of an acquaintance of mine found out that her senior in homeschool high school did not complete his year. And she very wisely did not allow him to graduate until he got his work done the next year. And he was miserable and he was upset because he was supposed to go to college. And yet he had to delay his college entrance by a year, whereas his girlfriend went ahead, who he ended up marrying, and she was a year ahead of him. And everyone found out what happened. And this never would have happened if his parents weren't strong about this. And he's a great individual. He has a great job. He's a great parent. And I don't think these things come about naturally unless kids are made to follow. You need to follow through with your kids and they're made to do what they're supposed to do. You can encourage your kids with praise. I'm a big encourager. I always said I never was a cheerleader, but I should have been because I'm the person who always encourages. I don't do it as much as my husband. He's the huge encourager, and he always sees the good. But I always encourage my kids that they could do it. I do this with my now adult children, and I do this with my grandchildren when they come to visit. Everyone wants to be praised and affirmed, and we should catch them being helpful or listening, or if they say something kind. One of my grandchildren was always teasing his younger siblings whenever he came for Sunday dinner. And he was very annoying, not only to his parents, but to his siblings. And I just started saying, hey, could you help me do something. And it was just like little things. And so now he walks in, and instead of tormenting his siblings, because he was obviously bored, he would just say, "Hey, Grandma, do you have anything you need me to do?" And I'm like, "I am so happy to see you. Absolutely, yes." And they were little things like, get some extra chairs out, or could you set the table, and they were chores, but he's a middle child, and he's getting all of my attention and all of my focus. And he just apparently needed that. And sometimes as parents, we can't do that because you have more children or you have other obligations. But if we can encourage our children to listen, we should. We can encourage listening by asking a child to recap at the end of a lesson, or if you read a paragraph, just stop and say, "Hey, what did I read?" There are other ways to encourage listening, and that is with drills or with games or even a pop quiz like what my teacher did with us. And you can hone in on your children's listening skills. I remember I even bought this curriculum one time, and you just read things like, take a red pencil and circle the square. And then you just went through the different things just to see if they could follow instructions when they're little. You can give them a paper and have them draw some shapes and just say, "Okay, color the triangle yellow." And just work on listening skills, simple things, and just, encourage them. With older kids, it is important that you sit with them and just say, "Hey, what's the problem and how can we solve this?" And work with them. They may not think there is a problem. They may think the problem is you, right? But it doesn't matter. Again, if you're worried that you're not doing a good job, I did a podcast last week, or it's the previous one to this one, and it's Moms, You Are Enough, to encourage you to just stand fast, be strong, and you can do this. Now I want to discuss the idea of later. This is a pet peeve of mine. I have one son in particular who would do what I said, but on his own time. This was fine until it wasn't. And I felt it was a form of passive aggression. Whenever I would say, "Hey, could you take that box upstairs," because his bedroom was upstairs, or "Can you put this away?" It was always, "Sure, Mom, I'll do it, but later." And he never did it. His response was correct, but the actions didn't follow. This was more than a listening issue. It was a behavior issue. I finally had to sit him down and say, "Look, this idea of later isn't going to work. And we have to do something about it. And whatever that is, whether it's a chore or an activity or schoolwork that needs to be completed on time, give them a time frame. Look, you've got 5 minutes to do this. Or when would be a good time for you to be finishing this assignment? We have to give our kids some parameters. I remember one year I was talking to my husband about it before the year began, and he goes, "Well, how long should a math lesson take? Or how long should their journaling take?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Put times on our checkoff list." So I actually said from this time to this time. And first I was like, "Oh my gosh, it looks too much like public school, or private school or whatever. You've got the bells ringing and this and that." And I was a teacher for 2 years, and I told him, "Oh no, it's bringing back PTSD, when kids wouldn't listen." And I worked really hard with my class on behavior first before I even taught anything. And this is when I was a teacher. So I really had to overcome what I personally felt and just put it on. And, he said, "Well, look, if it doesn't work, you can just take it off the next time, you did it on the computer, you can just delete that." And I'm like, "Oh, brilliant again." So I did that, and it worked. They had parameters. They were supposed to be done at this time, and they would always try to beat the clock. If your homeschoolers are like mine, they are very competitive. And so they tried to get done early. I was at my daughter's house this weekend, and she homeschools her children. And she has a marker board posted in her school area that has the days of the week and each child's responsibility, tour zone, and other important information. And there's a calendar even with the appointments, activities, and so much more. And I asked her, I said, "This is great. Why did you come up with this idea?" And she goes, "Oh, don't worry. It doesn't always work because the kids will ask me what their zone is, and I'll have to tell them to go to the marker board and look. But at least she has a place to direct them. I think that with a written reminder, when necessary, it's so important, but so are the consequences for failure to do what's expected. Sometimes it's missing out on a family activity or treat, and believe me, it hurts us worse than it hurts them. It doesn't take too many times for a child to realize it's easier to listen than rebel. I know you probably have one of those strong-willed children, and let me share a secret with you. There have been books written about strong-willed kids, and this topic has been talked about over and over and over again, and everybody's got their take on a strong-willed child. You know, they don't want to just follow instructions. If you tell them to do something, they're going to figure out a way out of it, and you need to not put them in a square. Okay, they don't like to be told. They want to be persuaded. Yet, they have to know you're in charge. And if we spend all of our time persuading a child because they're going to have a meltdown, to me, it kind of takes away parental authority. And maybe that's a little bit too militant. And if you have a way to persuade your strong-willed child and it works for you, God bless you. Do what you're doing. Do not listen to me. But I always expected my children, I expected a lot out of them. And believe me, they expected a lot out of me as a parent. Okay, so it went both ways. And I always expected that they understood we are a family. It's not me versus you. It's us, both of us, or all of us regarding the family. And this is not a battle. I hear you. I respect you. But here's your choice. You can either do it or not. It's up to you. And a strong-willed child will perceive their way as being right, but they want us to be able to stand up to them. And are you willing to take that challenge? You have to pick your battles, but you do have to have some lines that cannot be crossed, and you need to be prepared to be tested. And so, yes, it's difficult at times with certain children, but it doesn't mean it has to be a disruptor in the family. One of the things I want to talk about expectations really quickly, and I meant to add this to my Homeschooling for Excellence podcast, and I don't believe I mentioned it. There was a study one time. I was a psych major before I changed to education in college. And we read a lot of case studies. And one of the studies had to do with managed expectations. And this is a true story. So these two classroom teachers were given a set of students that were going to be coming in that year. And one teacher was told, your kids are all gifted, and we've grouped them in one class because they're going to be easier to motivate, and we're doing this test this year to give you all the gifted kids. The other teacher was told, your kids are marginal or average, low average, and we wanted to keep them all in one class so that they could be maintained that way and you would be able to teach them. And so the teacher with the gifted kids really had the class with the marginal students and the average students. And did you guess the outcomes at the end of the year? That's right. The teacher that thought her kids were gifted had the higher scores. Their kids attained a lot better outcomes and learned more than the teacher who really had the gifted kids, but pretty much dumbed down the lessons and didn't really expect a whole lot. So what does this tell us? This tells us that we can expect a lot out of our children. Even if they're struggling learners, it's okay. I've had struggling learners that have gone on to attain amazing things. Two of my struggling learners graduated with very high honors in college. But part of it is encouraging your kids that they can do it. Another is making sure that they understand what your expectations are and that listening not only is important for education, but it's the basis of good communication. It's so important to be able to listen, to communicate. Being a good listener means hearing the other person out, even when you can't think of, anything else but the 10 points of rebuttal you want to say. You will get your chance. Jot notes if you think you're going to forget. But truly listen. Put away that cell phone. Another one of my pet peeves when I'm talking to somebody, if they have their phone out and they're fidgeting, I know they're not listening to me, even if they say they are. So put away that cell phone, that computer, anything else that might be distracting you from focusing and listening to that person. And explain to your children, do you see how I'm listening to you right now? This is a respectful way to listen, and this is what I expect when I talk to you. If a child tries to interrupt, gently remind them to wait until you're finished. Sometimes putting your hand up could be a trigger, and you just may want to touch them on the shoulder and say, let me just finish. Can I finish, please? Then proceed. Explain that without listening, you can't answer a person's question fully or give an opinion without knowing all that they were going to say. Practice good listening and communication with your child. You know the thing. How many times has your kid said that to you and you're like, what thing? The key is listening. It's to encourage your children when they're doing well and to follow up assignments with oral activities, such as asking them to recap, giving a summation of what you learned, or even just telling you what you expect. And just make sure they understand. So I want to thank you, friends, for taking the time to listen in. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm excited about this series and the other ones coming up. So the next one in the series is going to be inspiring your kids to learn. Take care, everybody. God bless, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.